Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Erin Luczak, who is a personal risk advisor, speaker, singer, and a phenomenal community builder. What is the risk you are willing to take when it comes to your personal property? What is the level of risk you are willing to assume when it comes to your other liabilities? These are some of the areas we are going to touch on as we talk to Erin today about being a risk advisor and so many other things. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Erin. Let's jump right into this and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Before we get into your professional journey and your expertise, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would it be?
Non-linear, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. I started out going one way, went in a million other ways, but somehow I think ended up back where in a place I would have been happy to be regardless of how I got here. So definitely not direct, but still got to the same place.
Well, I love that. I don't think I've had non-linear before. So I love it because, it's not tangential. It's just non-linear. It's not circumstantial either, where it goes in a circle. It's just, it didn't go in a straight line. That is cool. So tell us more about that. I want to know why that is a word that resonates with you. And let's talk about that path. Let's talk about your passions and your life and what got you to where you are today. Because I think it's important not to just talk about the professional journey, but the personal journey that gave you those aha moments that helped you create and cultivate where you are today.
I grew up in a small town outside of Savannah, Georgia. So that's where sometimes there, sometimes not there accent comes from. And from a very young age, I was sitting in front of the television watching The Little Mermaid, and I turned around to see my parents standing in the doorway with their mouths wide open because I was singing along, and they realized, oh my gosh, this kid can sing, which neither of them can. Sorry, mom and dad. But, and so that started a lifetime of performing in competition, not in competition, touring, community theater, regional theater, and a kind of myopic life that was just music and performance and music and performance. And that's what we thought my journey was going to be. And there was really no other question. And so my parents drove me to oboe lessons and voice lessons and orchestra and this performance and that performance. I think I missed 95% of the high school experience because I was performing, and I was fine with that. And then life happened. One of the biggest things that set me back is I gained a lot of weight. And at that time, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we didn't have Adele before. We didn't have Lizzo. We didn't have this. We had Christina Aguilera back in her super skinny days, and we had Britney Spears. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't look like that, that was not your path. And so I think I choked it down and moved forward. But I had always wanted to move to New York City. And when I was in my mid-20s, I did, with very little money and no job, and did the kind of thing that you can only do at that age because you get much older and you get terrified to do it. And I sort of fell into insurance. I went into a staffing agency, said, send me to the first place you can. And that's where they sent me. And so I ended up working for an insurance brokerage, staying with an insurance brokerage, moving along in this world of kind of personal insurance, helping people with their homeowners, their auto, that sort of thing. And it was largely in the high net worth and ultra high net worth space, which then led to eventually me beginning to work with athletes and entertainers, which is a very special and important niche to me because it's close to my heart and because I understand where they're coming from. I'm not a stuffed shirt insurance person. No offense to any stuffed shirt insurance people, But I know what it's like to only want to do one thing and to be completely unconcerned with everything else that happens around you. So I find it an incredible gift to now be back in that world, but able to help people who were where I was 20 years ago. And so that's kind of how it all came back to being. And then lately, I have been singing in some of the strangest places and starting to sing again and starting to get my voice out there. And it's kind of all coming back around, but now I'm singing on my terms from a much stronger place emotionally and mentally. And so it's been phenomenal. And so I think I'm where I would have loved to be. It just kind of took some here and there to get there, but I got here eventually.
Well, that's wonderful. I love the evolution of your journey and you being back in a place that you really love with a different mindset, with that shift in focus too. You're really cultivating it from a place of authenticity where you're not having to shove your feelings down because you don't look like someone else. That's just unreasonable. We all are uniquely different. And so you were able to grow into more of who you are and give that to the world, which is phenomenal and authentic. And I'm sure that was super freeing.
It has been. And I will say that almost exactly 3 years ago now, when I made the transition to the role and the company I'm currently with, that is when I really said, hey, if I'm doing this as me. And you can take it or leave it. And yeah, I'm a little bit different. I may not be what you expect. And that is when everything really started happening for me. It's amazing when you free up the mind space of not trying to be someone else, how critical being you becomes and how critical a part of your journey it becomes, and people start to accept it. People recognize that. And look, I'm notorious for dyeing my hair crazy colors. It's all one color right now, which I think is making some people take a big giant sigh of relief. But I walked into a PE firm, a private equity firm, for a very, very prominent client with one half of my hair dyed red and one half of my hair dyed blue. And you know what? They don't care. Yeah. They don't care. I think probably maybe there was hey, whoa, that's a little strange, but it's about what you know. And so for me, being able to be that is important because my hope is that we'll stop judging people coming into the workforce by the way they look and the way they present and start listening to who they are and what they're able to accomplish. And if I can push the boundaries a little bit, then maybe that gives someone some wiggle room they might not have had 10 years ago.
So you were able to really set the terms of your life. And then also you assume some of your own risk per se, sure. Right? Going into that, I don't give a rat's patootie because this is how I'm setting my terms. Take it or leave it. And they took it.
Most of the time people take it. Yeah.
It wasn't anything malicious or bad or nefarious. It was you. It was just who you are, because maybe we don't look the same way, or maybe we dye our hair or have a nose ring or this or that or the other. It's okay. It doesn't mean that they're not effective at their job. They can still do their job. It's okay. Don't let it scare you.
We're in a talent crisis as it is because people don't always want to do insurance or finance. It's not the sexiest job in the world, right? So if we're already in a crisis, I don't want to hear hiring managers saying, well, that person was really good, but they had tattoos on their hands. Oh my God, who cares?
Yeah, right.
So important.
You had mentioned we're in a crisis. Tell us a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
I think there are some industries that are still kind of working through that boomer mentality. And look, I absolutely love the boomer generation. I'm Gen X. Well, I'm in the tail end of Gen X, but I have learned from them. I have watched what they're doing. I have grown with them, but they have a very old school mentality when it comes to business. You need to be in the office. You need to be in a suit. You need to look a certain way. You need to act a certain way. You need to be a certain way. And I think what that has led to is some of the newer industries. My husband works in tech. So coders, software engineers, tech guys, they can work from home. They can work from anywhere. They don't care what they wear. They don't care where they went to school. They don't care about any of that. As long as they're good at what they do, then they can have a place with some freedom and some flexibility. And so I think there's a little bit of a push and pull of how do we bring these new people into our industry and show them how fun it, like I'm having a blast. Like I talk to to the coolest people. I see the coolest people. I help the coolest people. But if you don't know that, you don't know that. And then on top of that, there is a certain level of deep caring that has to be present to do what I do. You have to really care about people and their stuff and their lives and the risk that they take. That caring factor is not always easy to find, and it doesn't come in every single person. And so it's finding people who are willing to work in this field, who are willing to put in the time to learn what is a deeply technical field, on top of that, who care enough to want to do it. So we're already competing with the work from home, unlimited PTO, wear whatever you want, be wherever you want. And then on top of that, we have to find the people who care. And that's tough. And it's not just insurance. I'm hearing it's legal fields are having trouble. It's everywhere. But I think we can make some concessions that will bring more people to us, and it will make it easier to find the people who will care and people who we can train and the people who will enjoy what we do.
So when it does come to personal risk, what are some of the questions we need to be asking ourselves as business owners, entrepreneurs, as those that you work with, maybe athletes or entertainers? What are some of the things that we need to really be considering at this time?
I think the first thing we all have to let go of is this knee-jerk emotional reaction of nobody's ever going to sue me. Yes, they are. And I don't mean that every person's going to get sued in their life. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is that people are at their worst when they're financially threatened. So when you get in that car accident and maybe somebody's injured, or you've done some property damage, or you have a party and somebody falls and breaks their leg, or any number of things that can happen, when people are looking at medical bills out of pocket, missed work, all kinds of issues, or you have a nanny you fire and they're suddenly without a job, that's when people really are at their most vulnerable, and they will sue. They will sue because they're up against a wall. I think the first thing we have to do is let go of this concept of, oh, I don't need to worry about that, because we all need to worry about that. Thinking about liability, thinking about the things we all do in our lives. I don't think any of us thought skiing, I always did, but because I work in risk, but I don't think any of us thought skiing was particularly scary until we saw Gwyneth Paltrow on trial for something that was fairly frivolous. And so we need to be thinking about that. And then I think we also need to be realistic about what we own and what it would cost for us to replace it, because people have this as cheap as possible, as little as possible approach to insurance. And I get it. It's because you're paying almost for an idea. It's a piece of paper that's meaningless until you have a loss. But you need to really check in emotionally with what a loss would feel like. And do you want to come out of pocket to pay for your house, $1 million out of pocket because you underinsured it? You know, if your car gets stolen, are you going to say, oh, well, I'll go buy a new car? Or are you going to deeply regret the fact that you went to liability only on your auto because now you have no coverage and no car? And I think it's important to think about those things and to find someone you trust to work with on that insurance, somebody you trust to tell you the truth, somebody you trust to be honest and to be open and to show you options and to talk to you until you understand it. If you can't find that person, keep looking, because we're out there and it's critically important. If I could convince people one thing, it would be stop thinking of insurance as a hassle and think of it as a tool. This is a tool you put in your toolbox to keep you on your feet when things happen, and things do happen.
I love what you're saying here, because when I host events, I know that the event space has insurance, liability insurance. However, I'm still going to get event insurance for the day. Why? Because they can sue me, they can sue the site, they can sue everybody. And I'm like, and it happens.
A good attorney is going to look for every pocket they can, and they're going to focus in on the deepest pockets there are. They'll say, well, I got a certificate of insurance from the venue space and they added me as an additional insured. And I said, but how many people do they have as additional insured for this event? And if they've got $1 million and 10 people get sued, that's not going to go far for you. And while sometimes your business liability or excess liability policies or your personal excess liability policies will cover certain things depending on who's having the event, why you're having the event, you want to separate yourself from those kinds of liabilities as much as you can. And sometimes having a shell corporation, if you're a high profile person, and placing assets in that shell corporation and ensuring the shell corporation, I'm giving away one of my secrets here, If you rear end someone and get out of the car and you hand them a auto ID card that says My Shell Corp LLC, they are far, far less likely to be Googling how much you're worth than if you handed them an auto ID card that said Tom Brady. That's the important thing to think about, is how do you protect yourself and what are those options? And a lot of risk management is not even about insurance. It's about planning to never have to use insurance.
There you go. The preventative measures. And yes, it is a piece of paper. And yes, we want to cut corners, but think about what if. I think that's really important. And it was funny because I had this ingrained in me as a youngster when I started driving. And at the point where I started driving, okay, I'm taking it way back here, folks. You didn't need insurance. You didn't need insurance. That's way back in 1980 something. My grandfather said, he was an entrepreneur. He was a big business owner. And he said, no, you're not driving that car without insurance. You got to plan for the future. And so never did I drive without insurance, ever.
Which is, puts you ahead of the game. It really does. I remember back when I was a teenager and I was driving, you would get on the phone with the insurance company and they'd ask you, hey, have you had any losses? And you'd say, I don't think so, or I don't remember this, or I don't remember that. And now we can find out in real time, which is a little terrifying. And we can find out if you called and placed a claim and then closed it out. We can find all kinds of things. It has changed and the evolution is a little tough and we're going very fast. But yeah, no, it's always been something that I didn't really think about until I did it for a living. And now that I do, I wish more people would say, no, I'm going to be financially really hurt if something happens. I am not going to take that chance.
I think this is really an important conversation that we're having today because as a coach, having been in the human services arena, worked in hospitals, I was covered under a lot of umbrellas. But as a coach, there's no umbrella that I'm covered under right now in the industry because there's no governing boards for this industry. Right. The insurance companies are like, you don't have to have insurance. But you know what I say to that? Be prepared. Be prepared. Yeah. I have liability insurance. And I always try and explain this to coaches. It doesn't matter if there's no governing board for this profession right now. Make sure you're set up for the future just in case it happens. Yes, just in case. And so carry that insurance. Have that liability insurance.
The thing about coaching that's difficult is you're giving all kinds of advice, and some of it might be legal, not I'm a lawyer legal, but some of it might be, hey, it's time to call your attorney, or, some of it might be financial if you're coaching people in that way. And the thing about lawsuits is it's not always the payout. It's not always losing the lawsuit. It's the cost of defending yourself that can be, it's such a time suck and a money suck. And insurance will take that off your plate. And so you can keep doing what you do well, even though you've been sued. And it might be completely frivolous, but let the insurance company argue that it's frivolous. That shouldn't have to be your job unless you're a lawyer. And then maybe it is. I don't know.
Right. We rarely have these conversations, and I think you are the first personal risk advisor I've had on this show. And we take risks every day, every single day. And we forget to think about what ifs. And I think that's important. I don't think we need to fear it. I think we need to think about prevention. And this is what we're talking about today. We're talking about those preventative measures we can take in the case of that what if this happens. Now, you have come from a place of creativity, art, music. You're also a great community connector. You went towards your passion. As a young woman, you moved from a different state to New York City. That's huge. And you're right. It's a little scary, but you did it. So tell us more about your music that you're cultivating. Are you cultivating it as a hobby or as something more potentially?
Right now, it's a hobby, although I have put out a challenge into the universe that my goal for 2024 is to sing the national anthem at a sporting event. So, my phone is open if somebody cancels last minute and I can get there. I'm doing it out of love right now. I had a music theory teacher in college who used to say an amateur is not someone who isn't good at what they do. It's someone who loves what they do too much to try and do it professionally. Mm-hmm. That really stuck with me. So right now I'm kind of singing. It's like I have a networking group where one of the group leaders has me sing every month. It's very silly. I do silly music insurance videos sometimes that I only show to certain people. And I'm playing around with it and trying to kind of see where I go with it next, and bringing in that creativity and that love of music that I think I kind of tucked down for a long time for a lot of reasons. As far as the connecting goes, the sort of undercurrent, the theme is I just love people. And I love knowing people, and I love helping people, and I love meeting people, and I love singing to people and hearing their feedback and hearing other people perform. And I just love people. And so everything I do right now is with that nod of how do I know more people, and how do I make sure that the cool people I know the other cool people I know. And so I'm trying to tie it all together, but we'll see. Who knows what's going to happen with the music, but I don't have pressure on me right now, one way or another. And that's a very freeing thing to be able to do it without that pressure.
That is awesome. I love hearing that, because you gave it up for some time and here you are back at it because it's so meaningful to you. And it is bringing together community as well. Music, song, singing. It's just so uplifting. I used to be part of choir chorus in school. For me, I loved it. It was my release. I was never going to make it anything more than that. It's just, I'll go around the house and sing. I'll sing in the car, but it's always such a release, and it's always so uplifting for me. But I do have to say, and I'll share this with you, when I was in Okinawa, Japan, I was living there, there were some professional opera singers there. And so I actually took some lessons with a professional opera singer who taught me some bel canto music. So it was fantastic. So that was an incredible outlet as well.
Never too late. And it's never too late to learn something new. It's never too late to get better at something. And it's never too late to go back to something you love that you thought you couldn't.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what we're talking about today. And your story reflects that in both your music and your profession. I do want to touch on one thing before we come to a close, and that is your podcast that you're thinking about and you're curating. Tell us more about that and when that's going to be out.
Well, it's a work in progress, and it's going to be called the Cheerful Bulldog, which is not because I'm from Georgia, although it is kind of coincidental, I suppose, in a way. But the Cheerful Bulldog is a nickname a friend of mine who's a writer gave me after interviewing me about what I do. And she said, it sounds to me like you're the cheerful bulldog, like you're happy, you're helping everybody. But then if somebody kind of steps out of line, you will bite, like you will get them. And I said, yeah, okay. So the Cheerful Bulldog is going to be just conversations with people I find interesting. It's a love letter to the network I've curated over the course of my life. The idea is to sort of take this deep feeling of love for people and share that with the world and allow the world to see all of the wonderful people I've been able to meet. So it's going to be short conversations with cool people. And I also sort of have a reputation in my networking groups of asking ridiculous questions. I love asking people just the silliest questions to see how they respond, because it's amazing to me. You might meet an accountant and you think, okay, this guy's a forensic accountant. Wow, that's a snooze fest. And then you get to talking and find out that they have some fascinating hobby you never thought about. And that's how people connect with other people. And that's what I want to bring into the spotlight. And I'm very excited about it. I'm hoping to start recording within a month. And I learned a new term yesterday, which is perfection-based procrastination, which apparently comes along with ADHD a lot, which I had never heard before. And I felt very called out by that term. And so I think we have to say at some point in time, you know what, I'm just going to do this. It won't be perfect. It's okay. Just going to do it. And so hopefully I'll start recording within the next month, and within the next couple of months, we'll see some short interviews with some really funny, cool people come out. And I'm excited just to show those people to the world.
Well, I'm excited for you. By the way, I think if you were a forensic accountant, that would be the coolest thing. Like, I find
super cool job. It's I
cool.
say that because I interviewed a forensic accountant one day who he ended up telling this story about stolen toilet paper out of the back of a warehouse and how interesting it was. And we were all just riveted by this guy. And I think nobody expected it, but it's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, it's a pretty darn cool job. Yeah. Absolutely. And I also really appreciate that your podcast is going to be love letters to your network. That is so fantastic. I love the way that you said that and put it together. We've covered so much ground here, and I love your insight, your wisdom, and your expertise that you're bringing here today. As we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, If you were to give the listeners one tip, just one tip to reduce their personal risk, what would it be?
Ask questions. Don't assume anything, and don't feel dumb for not knowing. Just ask. If you meet somebody who does what I do, ask them questions until you can't ask anymore, and never be ashamed for that. That's how you learn, and that's how you know what's happening. And nobody's innately in touch with risk. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, what risk am I taking? So just ask questions.
Love it. Thank you, Erin, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. You can follow Erin Luczak on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok at Erin L. Knows Risk.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.